Alright, let's just come out and say it. Man and the Wasp was okay. Like Scott Lang, it aims squarely for the middle and more or less hits its mark. We get decent to strong performances from the lead.
You should feel great about yourself.
And it leans so hard into the goofball science of the Ant-Man universe that we can't help but appreciate its charm. It could have been the Logan of the MCU. It was so close. I didn't realize that when I was watching the film, and like most everybody else, I thought it was a fun distraction after the gravitas of Infinity War.
I don't want to go. I don't want to go, sir, please.
But I left the movie feeling a vague sense of dissatisfaction, so I spent hours and hours thinking about it, and then I wrote thousands of words about it, and then I made a YouTube video about it. You know, like you do. Why is Ant-Man almost so smart? Because it misleads you about who the protagonist of the story is. Here's a hint. The name isn't in the title. Scott's goal in all this is to be home when the FBI comes to release him from house arrest so that he can have a normal life and be with his daughter. After he reunites with Hank and Hope, we also learn that he's interested in a romantic relationship with Hope. Other than that, he's there to help. To help Luis win the big contract and to help Hope and Hank get Janet back. Scott doesn't really have much internal drive to do either of those things. He has to be pushed there by the other characters. If Scott's main goal is just to be at home, he's not much of a protagonist. It'd be one thing if he'd been kidnapped by Hope and Hank and spent the rest of the movie trying to escape from them, while at the same time coming to grips with his romantic feelings for Hope. That would be the kind of stuff a protagonist is made of, but he doesn't. As soon as he's kidnapped, he volunteers to help, on the condition that he also really has to be at home when the FBI comes to take off his ankle monitor. He's not the protagonist. He's a supporting character. He has a personal goal, but it's not related to the main plot of the movie. He is the point of view character, but not the protagonist. According to John Truby, we should always tell a story about your best character.
You're simply the best.
I'm on a horse.
And he goes on to explain that best doesn't mean nicest. We're not talking about the most fascinating or most complex. Even if the character isn't particularly likable, you have to tell a story about your best character because that's where the audience is going to be interested. You always want that character to be the one driving the action. So, in Ant-Man and the Wasp, who drives the action? The main plot has to do with the question of who's going to be in control of the lab where Hope and Hank are trying to bring Janet back from the quantum realm. If Hope and Hank are in charge, then they bring her back safe and sound. If it's Ava and Bill, they bring her back, but they're going to drain her quantum energy, maybe killing her. If it's Milquetoast Justin Hammer, money? At the start of the movie, Hope and Hank are on track to bring back Janet, and they just need two things to make it happen. Some techno doohickey that Crystal Pepsi Justin Hammer's got, and the information that's in Scott's head. They get both of these almost immediately. The other hurdles they face are arbitrary technical glitches that are waved away like, I don't know, pesky ants or something. They face complications when the lab is stolen and when they get arrested, but their basic commitment to rescuing Janet never wavers. We don't know whether or not they'll succeed, but there's never any question as to whether what they're doing is right or wrong. They don't make a moral choice. That's what heroes do. Heroes make a choice between the greater of two good outcomes, or, more rarely, the lesser of two evils. Even when Ava's explanation of her backstory gives Hope an opportunity to question her father's moral standing, she ducks this in favor of a noble yet simple pursuit of her mother. Hope and Hank are active characters, unlike Scott, but they don't make moral choices. That honor belongs only to Ava and, to an extent, Bill. She starts the movie with the same basic need as Hope and Hank. She wants to bring Janet back. Her need is more selfish. She wants to drain Janet's quantum energies so that she can reverse the phasing sickness that she had, and she's not bothered with questions of consent. At the outset of the movie, she has no reason to think this will be an issue for Janet. Her conflict with Hope and Hank is more the result of her resentment and distrust of Hank, which prevents her from just going to them and asking for help. We do learn that Bill has convinced her not to kill Hope and Hank.
She wanted to kill you, Hank, but I told her no.
She was trained by S.H.I.E.L.D. to be an assassin, so she's clearly struggling with morality. Interesting. She decides to steal the lab and rescue Janet herself rather than counting on Hope and Hank. She knows stealing is wrong, but doesn't have any reason to think that there's a negative long-term consequence to doing so. On the other hand, if she doesn't steal the lab, it's possible that Hank, whose spite she blames for her condition in the first place, will spurn her like he spurned her father, and she'll never get the chance to be healed. Stealing may be wrong, but it would be a greater wrong to let herself die. Her choice is between survival and honor, and there are plenty of scoundrel-type heroes who make this choice all the time in cinema, and we love them for it.
Mercy is the mark of a great man. Guess I'm just a good man. Well, I'm all right.
Are there other ways to solve the problem? Sure. Try talking to Hope and Hank and maybe cooperate. That'd be a thing. Ava is flawed because she makes an immoral choice based on her resentment of Hank for what he did to her father. That doesn't make her evil, that makes her interesting. Her arc gets even more interesting when it's revealed that her plan will kill Janet, leaving aside the question of whether or not the movie makes this clear enough.
That would rip Janet apart.
You don't know that.
But that's a whole nother video. Ava's response to Hank's insistence that her plan will kill Janet is to proceed anyway, regardless of the harm to Janet. When faced with a complication on her journey, she doubles down on selfishness over conscience, even with Jiminy Lawrence Fishburne Cricket over her shoulder telling her that maybe she's going a little too grimdark.
You lay one finger on that little girl, I won't help you, and we're done.
She moves from scoundrel-level moral ambiguity to active pursuit of an immoral goal. A negative character arc. She continues her selfish pursuit through the rest of the movie, a fall from grace whose consequences are only arrested through the fiat of Janet apparently having quantum healing powers that appeared out of nowhere. There's only one character in the movie who actively pursues a goal and undergoes a moral change. The bad guy. This makes Ant-Man and the Wasp a really interesting story, because the protagonist is set up in opposition to the point of view character. It's a negative change arc, so we see the protagonist's morality deteriorate. As sometimes happens in this sort of story, the protagonist loses, which conforms to our expectations of the victory for the POV character in a blockbuster. But it's a really different kind of story than what we typically get in a major Hollywood flick. Interestingly, it's not the first time Marvel has done this. You know where else we saw this technique? Infinity War. Thanos, the bad guy, is 100% the protagonist of that film. In that case, we shift point of view regularly, so there's no one character who fills the same role that Scott does in Ant-Man and the Wasp, but our sympathies are certainly with the heroes generally. Also, Thanos succeeds in his quest, unlike Ava, whose redemption is by pure fiat. And that's what tells me that the screenwriters did not understand what they were doing. The Writers Guild gives credit to 5 people for writing the screenplay: Chris McKenna, Eric Summers, Paul Rudd, Andrew Barrer, and Gabriel Ferrari. That's a lot of cooks in this kitchen. While I'm fairly sure somebody sat down and mapped the script against the 3-act structure, I doubt that anyone really got into the weeds about want versus need and desire and all that good stuff. They wrote a fun Ant-Man movie, so Paul Rudd could apologize for his phone ringing during his villain monologue.
Christ's sake!
That's me. I'm sorry. Look, can you tell me who's texting me?
They weren't trying to be subversive, they were trying to write a villain who had a decent motivation. If they'd realized what they'd stumbled onto, they would have completed Ava's arc in a satisfying way, rather than treating her as an unimportant loose end to tie up once Hope and Hank met their goal. She's not a loose end. She's the protagonist! That's why the movie feels unsatisfying in the 3rd act. We respond to Ava without even knowing why, and the paltry resolution to her arc leaves us wanting more. If the screenwriters knew who she was, they'd have done more with her. Ava has a negative arc in the film, where she winds up morally and spiritually in a worse position at the end than she was at the beginning. And it's really too bad that the writers didn't know what they were doing when they wrote her character, because if they leaned into her fall as effectively as they leaned into goofy comic book science, they'd have had a really compelling, dark character as the moral core of a popcorn movie. After Infinity War, I'm sure Marvel and its fans were counting on Ant-Man and the Wasp to bring back the yucks.
Awesome.
If only Cap could see you now.
Hilarious.
But man, how great would it have been if we had watched this woman destroy herself, while hapless Paul Rudd just didn't get it and kept making her more and more desperate every time he lovably foiled her plans to save her own life.
Misdirection. One of the first things they teach you at Online Close-Up Magic University.
No! You wouldn't have to change much. Leave him as the POV character, but show us how every time Scott wins, Ava's survival is further imperiled. She becomes, quite understandably, crazed as her attempts to save herself are repeatedly thwarted by this so-called hero who is totally oblivious to the damage he's doing. Scott is kind of the perfect idiot, and watching him rip this woman's mind apart entirely by accident would have been this amazingly bleak teardown of the entire superhero genre. Much as Logan deconstructed it before, Ant-Man and the Wasp could have made audiences take a second look at the unintended consequences of comic book action, and how heroic actions can spawn something so much worse. Thanos' goals were noble if you accepted his premise, but it's too easy to see how he gets it wrong. Ava's fight for her own survival has no such ambiguity. She is dying through no fault of her own, and if she's taking desperate measures, it's impossible not to empathize with that. Seeing a superhero continually work to ensure her painful death would force us to look at every hero through a similar lens. Thor is not a hero if you're Loki. And even Captain America starts to look tarnished when you point out that he can be manipulated into acts of evil by feeding him misinformation from someone he trusts. How many missions did he undertake for Hydra before he realized that they were controlling S.H.I.E.L.D.? And if he can be controlled by somebody feeding him misinformation, are you sure that nobody can mind hack Bucky these days? And this guy is so absolutely convinced of his own infallibility that he won't accept United Nations control of his metahuman assault team, he's not even willing to consider the advice and consent of the sovereign nations where he's conducting paramilitary operations.
Hi, I'm Captain America.
Thank you, Captain. I'm pretty sure this guy's a war criminal now, but whatever. I have to show these videos. It's required by the state. Let's do it.
Once you see heroes as fallible, it's hard not to tumble down the rabbit hole. And who better to illustrate this point than Ant-Man, the most fallible hero of them all? Done right, Ant-Man and the Wasp could have done something so much more devastating than Thanos' Infinity Gauntlet. The movie could have destroyed audiences' trust in the heroes that we've been watching for the last decade.
There are some who would prefer the word vigilantes.
And what word would you use, Mr. Secretary?
How about dangerous? What would you call a group of US-based, enhanced individuals who routinely ignore sovereign borders and inflict their will wherever they choose, and who, frankly, seem unconcerned about what they leave behind?
Ant-Man and the Wasp could have actually destroyed the MCU. The arc of the final Avengers movie could then not only be to restore a broken world, but to restore the faith of the people of our world that the Avengers truly are the heroes that they claim to be. Who could do that? Captain America? No. I love the guy. Maybe too much. But in my hypothetical post-Ant-Man world, he's tainted. But there is someone perfect for the job. Someone who could prove that superheroics are more than just capes and good intentions. That someone is Hawkeye. Thanks for watching, guys. If you enjoyed my analysis of Ant-Man and the Wasp and how we could have taken it in a different direction, then click that like button. I really appreciate it. Hit the subscribe button. It's down here somewhere. I think it's a requirement of YouTube. You're like, I don't know where the subscribe button is down here. It's just click wherever you see it. Thank you again for watching. And if you would like to find out more about how Hawkeye can save a destroyed MCU, then let me know in the comments. If you thought I was right about the structure of Ant-Man and the Wasp, if you had any other directions that you thought would be interesting for the movie to go, I would really love to hear what your take is on the smartest movie in the MCU since Infinity War. Thanks very much, everybody. This has been JDM Baldwin. I'm signing off for now. Take care.